Thank you, everybody, for joining our premiere episode of Through Eternity Talks. With us today is our very special guest, Gracelyn, who has been a guide with us for many years. Hey, Gracelyn, how are you?
I'm doing great, Rob. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, great. I'm doing
Hmm.
great because I get a bit of time in the day where I can chat with you. As I've done in my introduction little podcast before, when I talk a little bit about why we're doing this, as I've always kind of said, through the years, you and I both have been in Italy for many, many years and shared
Yeah.
a lot of stories. But a lot of times, guides are passionate about what they do. They're fascinated by stories. They're fascinated by new things they've learned. And often I find myself, even if I'm having a dinner with colleagues or whatnot, I find myself saying, I think people would be really interested in what we are talking about because there are so
Mhm.
many books written on any subjects, and you always have different points of view. And then I
True.
think it's kind of our jobs to pick what makes the most sense to us. How does that help us create a vision, a story for what we are going to impart to people on our trips?
It's very true. And I think it's a lot of fun. It's that time period when we're all finished our tours and kind of meet up for, I don't know, a coffee or something afterwards and share even information, stories, and say, oh, wow, I never looked at it that way before. Where did you get that from? So, yeah, there's a lot to learn from just chatting and sharing a bit of
Meet up
information.
for coffee. I seem to recall in our video on Facebook that we kind of disclose the fact that we love to go sometimes to special places for a little
Yes.
aperitivo, a little glass of wine or a prosecco or a Aperol
Mm.
spritz.
Well, I guess we're doing this earlier in the day, so I said a coffee, but Aperol spritz or a nice glass of wine, absolutely. After a tour, works perfectly for me.
Remember, I'm going to be like Barbara Walters. I want us to get to the truth
Okay.
of these discussions. I
Mm.
want to have guides crying at the end of them. This is the important thing that we're going to get to.
I've
Anyway.
got my tissues. I'm ready.
Okay, you got your tissues? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I want
Hmm.
people to take photographs of me to do memes with, or I'm gonna do like some funny faces. Anyway, that's my own glorification. Talking about people who kind of believe themselves to be gods while they're alive, it's going to bring us to one of a couple of subjects that we're going to talk
Oh.
about, and that is JC, not Jesus Christ, but maybe
Hmm.
for the ancient Romans, he could have been Julius Caesar. So, what we're going to discuss today is Julius Caesar and also how he's connected to one of my favorite places in Rome. So, this week we're doing a special series kind of promoting the Roman Forum, the Palatine Hill, and the Colosseum. And I
Mm.
thought that it would be great to bring you in and talk about it because I was able to witness your lovely virtual tour that I thought you were perfect for. That's why I asked you to do it. I said,
Uh-huh.
do a story, do a tour about Julius Caesar. So, off at the top of your head, what can you
Mm.
tell me about?
Yes. Oh, off the top of my head. Well, I think that's what made the research and putting the tour together so much fun because off the top of my head, I always think about the most commonly asked question, which strangely, I even got that this past week. So only a few days ago, when people ask me, Julius Caesar, so is he the hero or is he is he the bad guy? What is he? Do we hate him? Do we love him? Did they hate him? Did they love him? And the only thing with Julius Caesar that you could say is yes. So you have to go back and say, okay, let's see where this person came from to create the person that is so famous. But then there's also so many different words that are thrown out that we really have a different perspective in today's day and age, like dictator. You know,
Careful with
what
some
does
of
that
these
mean?
words. Maybe there's like censorship going on our podcast. Yeah, it's funny when you're saying that to me. If you ask me, I'd say he's a politician.
Ah, okay, very simple. Yes. the
you know,
ultimate
which
politician.
is where you don't know. Do people love him? Do they hate him? I always kind of thought of him as being like probably one of the greatest politicians ever, because you
Yes.
you kind of throw out his name, everybody recognizes Julius Caesar more so than some of the other superstars
Yes.
of whom we talk about.
Yeah, it doesn't matter background, doesn't matter educational background, it doesn't matter geographical background. People, everybody knows him. But it's funny that you said politician, because other people might immediately say general.
Yeah.
But the difference between generals today, we try and hope that military isn't political, but 2000 years ago that wasn't the case.
No.
It was part of politics. It was essential to part of politics, and how to come back, how to go up that cursus honorum, that ladder.
Oh yeah, that's so funny. You've seen the shows. Remember, I'm a ham actor, and of course, I always have to
Uh-huh.
talk about that. Well, we don't do them anymore, but the miracle players. So we did
Right,
Caesar
right.
and More Than Just a Salad, right? And so there was a part of the gig where we'd say, "From Questar to Praetor to Consul." Didn't put the general in, but that's what we would do.
Exactly. And his is fascinating to look through, just looking at one person alone, especially one person this famous. And this I enjoy talking about, when I'm doing a virtual tour. And you say, well, here's how he started. He's a teenage Flamen Dialis. And people go, hmm? Hmm? And the politics involved in those positions, and that position being removed from him, it changed the course of history, basically.
Sure. The Flamen priests. That was another role we got to play. I won't go into how that was portrayed.
How that worked out for you.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. It was a lot of fun playing Flamen priest. Yeah, it's so funny because he's I would even say sometimes a romantic figure.
Yes.
I think what's great about him, and why I chose you to kind of present
Mm-hmm.
this virtual tour, is that it's not just there's a lot of fascinating stories, a lot of gossip.
Absolutely.
That's how I kind of approach things when I do a tour. Is I really love to go to those books, and I think a lot of people who come from love those books. And I always think about Colleen McCullough. She wrote a book. The writer. She's the Australian author of the Thornbirds with
Thornbirds. Right.
so huge in the 70s and the early 80s.
Yeah,
And
I remember.
she wrote this book. I mean, these historical novels are fascinating. I mean, they're done by people who are very, very thorough in their research. They don't just kind of start writing. They're very, very thorough. And she wrote Julius Caesar, and then she also talked about romantics. She talked Caesar's women, right? That was something quite interesting. Have you ever read any of her books?
Do you know what? I did read the Thornbirds, but I did not read the book. Yeah, well, you just dated us, because didn't you say something about the 1970s, my friend? So yes, 80s. In the 80s, let's push it a little further. But yes, but no, I didn't read her book on Julius Caesar. That was my time period of like I Claudius, to be honest with you.
Don't eat the figs, of course.
The books and the series, and Claudius the god.
Yeah, I mean, so there's these wonderful stories. They kind of give you an idea, and I think it really helps along when we are going into what is the business, political, and religious center of the city. Is that I would totally recommend that you go and read these books, because she really does a great idea of giving it the life. It was such an inspiration for me because I always talk about, when I give a tour in the Roman Forum, I have a kind of Julius Caesar spiel, because everyone kind of asks about him.
Of course.
You talk about like his family, that he came from a very prestigious family, that he then ended up that the family had no money. They were great aristocrats. I mean,
right.
How do you approach when you talk to people on your tours when you talk about Julius Caesar?
Well, that's one of the things that I always find interesting. The fact that, I mean, you cannot change in ancient Rome who your family is. So your family is prestigious, whether you're wealthy or whether you're poor. So his family was one of the most important. They'd bring their line all the way back. And you know, because it's part of his propaganda, being the ultimate, like you said, politician.
Mm.
But I do like to talk about that. And I do like to talk about his beginnings because, you know, you say, let's just imagine that you're born and here you are living in a house in Beverly Hills, and you're only seeing people around you in Beverly Hills, people who are like you. You know, the difference with Julius Caesar is maybe his mind was a little bit more open, which is why, you know, that popularis side of those parties, you know, was more his style. Because if you have the family name, but if you don't have the money, and remember, he's brought up in the Subura, he's not brought up on the top of the Palatine Hill. That this really, from an early age, kind of sets who he is, let alone you have to go into the family dynamics and his uncle Marius, you know, the great general. So this is a huge deal. What about his most formative years? What happened at that time period that made him that amazing politician? And maybe, you know, when we say, is he the villain? Is he the hero? He was the hero to a lot because he kind of understood more than the upper echelon why people were upset and what people wanted, what people were looking for, what they, you know, notice us, take care of us, and do things for us. It's not about just the upper echelon.
That's fascinating. I've always appreciated the fact. I was just thinking while you were talking. I think with a lot of what our guides, you know, since I kind of go and I'm particular about whom I invite to work with us. I make them audition. You are a person who is an actress like me,
Right.
both have studied theater. But each one of you guys, we all have very, very different approaches. What I always love
Yes.
about you and some of the other guides too is that you have a vast amount of knowledge, but you make it effortless. And I think that's really wonderful because I don't think people kind of come back from your tours and say, Grayson was very informative. They were just like, they bring them along without them even knowing it. You know, you've brought them along and told them many, many things where it doesn't feel like they're in a class or whatnot.
Right.
It's a wonderfully balanced out thing. So I was thinking the way I approach it, I'm fairly dramatic. I kind of like push the whole story through and I get through, you know, but it's just very, very, very different. You know, I love to talk about points of Julius Caesar, how he kind of makes himself seem to be a certain way. I remember back in the day, I loved to do kind of
Mm-hmm.
these promotional tours, and it was such it would bring crowds to me if I would talk about Julius Caesar. I remember writing specifically your brother, who is works in the faith. He is a priest, of course,
Mm-hmm.
studied Latin. So I'm sure, as my mother went to the girls' school of Latin, they probably talked about Caesar's Gallic campaigns. You know, and she's like,
Yes.
all was divided into three parts. You know, that he talked about this stuff that is such important. Literature in the Latin language. And I remember reading about that he would apparently have three scribers and he could dictate letters at the same time and be dealing with other people. I can barely tie my shoes by myself at one time without getting distracted. So I'm amazed by this stuff. I'm amazed
It,
how this politician, general, ladies' man, you know, changed
it
him.
came so naturally. That's one of the things that it does seem that it came so naturally to him. Like you said, just, you know, being able to dictate this, do that. And I think he never took his eye off of the end game and what he was looking for, which basically, well, you know, we can talk about the final position as dictator, but honestly, it was counsel, you know, moving up that rung to the most important positions. That was what was important to him. And it didn't matter which position he was doing, which is so fantastic. He always knew. So as he's up in Gaul and these letters are coming back, which are going to be put together, you know, into the Gallic Wars, it's he's creating his own propaganda machine every step of the way. In every step that he did, whether it was he was an aedile, and it's like, okay, I'm the guy who manages like infrastructure, streets, things like this, and I also have to put on the games.
Mhm.
I get to do for the festivals. Okay. Who are the people who are waiting for the festivals? Well, they're the lower classes. They're the masses.
Mhm.
I got to be the best date aisle ever.
Mhm.
the best gladiator games, or the best whatever it is. But he always knew he put himself into debt doing this, but because he always was looking 3 steps ahead, which is so fascinating about him. But
Mhm.
it's funny you said about the different styles. I think my style comes a lot. Also, my father was an actor originally, so very much like the two of us. And then he became a teacher, a history teacher, and he was crazy about history. And as he went up into a different world in education, board of education, but it was always about history. And he would tell us this stuff is just, if you love it and it's fun, it is so easy to be a teacher because all you have to do is love it. And I feel like that's what, he used to tease me. He's like, that's what you do on your tours because you're a teacher who walks while they're teaching. So I don't know, but without trying to sound like school, it's vacation. But I think that we're really lucky because in doing something, whether it's with people live walking through these incredible sites, I don't think people even understand the significance of the Roman Forum, because you go, this is the center of all life
Mhm.
right here in the center of life of the Roman city. But then as Rome becomes this great empire, it's also, this center of life for the empire, this historic center. So there's so much there. And it's easy because, like you said, when you give speeches and talk about Mark Antony and, when he's speaking at the funeral of Julius Caesar, well, we've got the roster there. You have these things in front of you. You don't need to have too much inspiration. The site is inspiration already.
Exactly. It's funny. I was going to bring that back because you mentioned also the Roman Forum, and then I'm going to get you some questions about the Subura. So, ladies
Sure.
and gentlemen, most of you are probably listening to us on the podcast, maybe doing dishes or exercising if you're allowed out to do those exercises. But we are going to be taping this on a Zoom conversation. And we're going to try to insert some things that we're going to talk about now because we're going to talk about the Roman Forum and a bit of the Subura. And if you're also curious about it, you can also see on our YouTube channel that we've just uploaded on Monday a video of me doing a TE Walks live where I'm right inside the Great Forum. But Julius Caesar works very great. Works well with the forum because I think he changed
Mhm.
a lot of what the forum was. So
Yes.
you stated, right, that it was the center of everything.
Yes.
Why was it the center? What made it the center of everything? Why was it so important? And how did
Mhm.
Julius Caesar end up changing things?
Well, if you just look at its positioning, simply, and I'm talking the most basic, and you're just looking at a map, and
Mhm.
you see when they talk about the 7 hills of Rome. Now, Rome is more than 7 hills, but there are 7 hills where Rome, we say, the ancient city begins. And they're close to each other and they're not far from the Tiber River. And they've got these common valleys between them. But if you look, the first settlement is the Palatine. Across from it is the Capitoline. It's that central valley. It just made the perfect meeting place for people. So it always was a bit of a meeting place, and there was, of course, they talk about that lacus, lake. I'm thinking swamp. Once this is all drained out, it just makes sense. We're going to meet here for everything pertaining to our civic life,
Mhm.
our political life, our religious life. Remember, there's no separation in church and state. Everything is so interconnected that it ends up growing into a space where anyone, especially a Roman man, whether it was lower upper classes, you're going to be passing through this area because you're going to be coming to hear the news. You're going to be coming to meet with your patron, or you are the patron. You are going to be passing through. Maybe you're going to the tribunals, to the courthouses, which were the basilicas, the curia. Maybe you're a senator. But there were a million reasons, and plus, you think about even for a young Roman male, this is where those famous tablets, the 12 tablets of laws written in bronze, you go, you memorize this stuff. So there was this whole idea of like national pride, let's say, other than center of civic life and center of religious life all rolled up into one.
Sure. An amazing place. Now, I think around the time of Julius Caesar, let's say
Hmm.
the infamous date, right, was 44 BC.
Yeah.
The population was over 1 million people, right?
Yeah, that's an estimation.
An
Yep.
estimation, so probably even much bigger. We're not even sure who was to be considered
Who's included in the census? So that's always a question.
exactly. Exactly. Isn't that funny? I always, guys, while we're talking about this, when you talk about politics, there's been a census going on in the United States that was kind of controversial. I mean, we don't have to have any
Hmm.
opinions on it, but it's just that these things always kind of repeat themselves in history.
Sure.
So we have the city center, the business, political, religious
Hmm.
center with basilicas, temples, shops, markets. Was it crowded?
Yep.
Very crowded, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Weren't allowed to be riding through with carts with animals. You couldn't do that during the day. Absolutely not. This would have been packed with people coming in, coming out for a whole variety of different reasons.
Absolutely.
Also for the festivals, also for the triumphs. It just depends. But it was utilized. The space was utilized daily.
Exactly, exactly. And so imagine, like you said, there is Julius Caesar who was coming up in the ranks. He came from a prestigious family. He had all the
Mhm.
ingredients, except he needed money to be a very powerful consul member. He did become a consul, but then I
Yep.
think people found him threatening, so they shipped him off to be a general in Gaul. And not the smartest thing if you want to get rid of a man who ends up being not only, as you said, great with having two steps ahead thinking, if you're going to be that way and you're a strategist, you're going to be a great general. And if you're a great
Sure.
general, you get the only thing that he was missing: money, right?
Money. Right. Well, but in the beginning, the Senate, they weren't stupid. You've got some of those senators, those conservative elitists. This is how the triumvirate begins too. Remember, they're the ones you said, how does he get into power? Well, he's helped. He's helped by the money man. He's got one on one side, Marcus Licinius Crassus, and then he's got Pompey the
Actually,
Great. So
somebody
you've
had,
got
yes.
so you've got a little, hey, I'll help you with the backing in one way. I'll help you with backing in one way. But then you got to remember us and what we want you to push through, which he is able to do. There's supposedly checks and balances. But, when you have your second council, this is when he was council in 59,
Mhm.
so afraid that mobs are chasing him to his house, dumping excrement on his head, basically you're making your own decisions. So, when they do give him that, okay, you're governor of Gaul, so he goes up as a general with a legion, it was only Gaul underneath the Alps.
Mhm.
So can't go too far. Gaul underneath the Alps, and you got one legion. But lucky Julius Caesar, the governor who was Gaul above the Alps that had the frontier that had three legions, he died, and it just his constituents kind of helped push it through. So they said, just to give him the other governorship, he'll have the two, both sides. But what does it leave him with? Four legions is what it leaves him with. And a great excuse to go to war, bring back booty, without having anything decreed by the Senate. So yeah, he was a smart cookie, but he was also lucky. Very, very lucky when you think
Oh,
about that too.
that's what makes the people who are great in history, right? They happen to be at the right place at the right time and making
Exactly.
right choices. So he
Hmm.
conquers Gaul through 10 years, writes these campaigns, then gets also all the profit. I've always understood that the generals were able to acquire all the profit from the slaves whenever they conquered. Some other things were shared with the soldiers and the booty
Yes.
and stuff. But so we have a man now, very powerful, not
Hmm.
even back in Rome because he wasn't allowed to go into Rome or Italy with his army,
Exactly.
but he sets up construction campaigns because the forum itself was overcrowded, right? And
Lots of
that's,
construction
so what are
campaigns.
you going to do? You're going to build something
Hmm.
with your name on it, right?
Hmm.
The former.
Now, and the majority happened around, I mean, there's a lot going on by 46 by the time he comes back. So he's already crossed the Rubicon. We've already gone
Yeah,
into
declared.
civil war, at this point. But, but also, like we said, he's not stupid. Even before he came home, there was a festival in Rome after that last main battle. And I find this fascinating. He said, nope, I'm paying for this feast at the festival. I'm paying for it. And he also made sure that some of the food was prepared in his own home. They said, because the people needed to know who is, Daddy Julius is taking care of you. And he did. Remember, there's also booty that was shared amongst the Roman people when he comes back. So it's hard if you have the upper echelon who are mad at you, but everyone else is like, he's given us stuff, man. He's given us stuff. And then comes back, and what does he do? Starts the building. And it's an amazing amount of building, from the basilica, the new basilica, Basilica Julia, of course. Everything's in the name of the Julii, of course, the Curia Julia. There's part of the new pavement was put in the Roman Forum, but this is going to continue. There were so many programs. The majority of it is all completed by Augustus, completed by his heir.
Of course, we'll definitely get to that. It's just that he sets this up. It's so funny talking to you, Grayson. So we're looking at each other over Zoom. People can see this on our YouTube channel if they want to. We're going to insert images sometimes as we talk about things. But it makes me feel like, we're on MSNBC or Fox News, like what my parents were constantly watching every day when I was back in the States. The talking heads, as my parents called it.
Right.
Here we are, the talking heads, not talking about the politicians of today, but we're talking about what happened in the past. But so many of these things seem to be repeating themselves. What was going on on January 6th? No matter what, Donald Trump is a controversial figure that many, many people very much despise or love, And so I think that Julius Caesar was not the same person, of course, but he was a figure that was it was a protagonist because there was a need of change going on. In fact, let's talk about, because people want to know, why was he killed? If he did all this stuff, if he was doing good works for the city of Rome, he was giving things to people that the populace, the general populace, loved him. Why was he assassinated? What was the reason?
There's one thing that you have to say with the ancient Romans, that going back to their pride, to the founding of the Republic, 509 BC, that idea that was so ingrained into a Roman, which was never to be under the rule of one individual. And this is the entire system was based on this. You've got two people who rule, councils, not one. They take advice from the body, which is the Senate, who are normally, it comes from elders who had held positions before. So they're there to give advice. Just like if you think, whether we're talking about Parliament, whether you're talking about in the US or the Senate and the Congress, you've got the Assembly of the People. But, this is the system. Now, the system wasn't working by the time of Julius, by the time of the big generals. If you think as Rome grows and grows, you're a soldier. You're not a farmer soldier like the beginnings of Rome anymore. You're not coming back for the harvest in October. You're not leaving in March. You've been gone for years. The people that you trust is the person who's taking care of you, which people like Julius Caesar, your general, and they start to shift their concept of their alliance. It's not that idea of the Republic. So things were kind of crumbling at this point. But what made him on the side of the people who thought he was a villain, there was that first position of dictator. Now, dictator, was temporary. It was time of civil war. It was time of unrest, where they say, okay, we can't manage with the two checks and balances. So we all agree on a dictator, and they're there for a set time period. If you think about Sulla, and then he goes into retirement, so there were dictators who left. He became really dangerous because probably he started to believe his own propaganda. I come from the line of the goddess Venus. And he accepted a title that should never have been accepted, which was dictator for eternity. And, this was the perfect excuse, whether or not it was that some of these senators cared so much about the republic or were so fearful of him. But it was the perfect excuse that we have no choice. We have to get rid of the tyrant. We must restore. But the problem was, what happens on the other side? You've got soldiers behind him, people who are the lower classes behind him, people on the popular side who were behind him, who are horrified because, hey, we just got out of a civil war, and now, we're assassinating the guy who's rebuilding the city. It's complicated.
Yeah, it is. It is. In fact, if I recall, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that title that you brought up, dictator in a time of emergency, was the title Imperatore, emperor. That it was originally, that's what it came from. This title during the emergency. That's what I always had learned. And he was never officially what we called an emperor, but
No.
They
Imperatore, as in having imperium, you mean?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Not the title, but it was like from that, it derived from this title was given to them. But there's like a whole evolution. But as you brought up the fact, you're saying, okay, it was because of the roots. You're going for the whole good side, right? You're going for the good point of saying this is not what Rome was founded on. The men got rid of the kings because of dictatorial behavior. But could it be that William Shakespeare writes a famous tragedy about this, Julius Caesar, that it is about human emotion and that people were jealous of his power, like Cassius and Brutus? It's a wonderful story to kind of interweave going through. And of course, they take up the mantle of this after he is assassinated. You mentioned it. Augustus ends up becoming the leader.
Sure.
We talk about it in 2 seconds, but it takes about 26 years or so, 20 years before, because he died in 44 BC is when he's assassinated on the Idibus Martis. I always love to do in my play, The Soothsayer. Now, my friend played it, but then when I do the story to people, I always give him an Irish accent, swearing beware the Ides of March. He has an eye patch in my eye.
It sounds like a leprechaun.
Beware the Ides of March. Yeah, well, I think she did a bit of a more authentic Irish, Scottish accent anyway. And he says the Ides of March are come, but I sees it, but not gone yet. Anyway, so he's assassinated. Augustus takes it up. He builds other things, and he builds the Temple of Mars, the Avenger, with a wall. That's the only thing really standing of it. That leads into that area that you mentioned that you can even walk through today.
The firewall. Just stopping the fires if they came from the Subura into the area, which was more important, which was, of course, the Forum.
Exactly. So it's so wonderful because we are having, just the two of us talking about one of the most famous figures in history. There are so many different points of view that one can look at this individual, but we can continuously do that with other people too.
Yes.
Julius Caesar, Augustus, his wife Calpurnia, whom I also got to play, one of my favorite.
Oh, you did.
Is with Caesar more than just a salad.
Not Pompeii. Not Pompeii. She seems like it was might have been more fun.
Do you think Pompeii or maybe Cleopatra?
That's true.
I had a story about an actor that was doing dubbing here, John Gayford, and he was on the set and worked as an actor in the film Antony and Cleopatra with Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor.
Wow.
It was all filmed in Rome. There's just always these wonderful stories, but they help us make the places like what you talk about in the Roman Forum, the Basilica Julia, the Curia where the Senate met. And then you go to the story of Augustus and you can talk about the Temple of Mars and Avenger, the Forum of Augustus, the Forum of Julius Caesar, and you have another whole Palatine Hill virtual tour.
Yes.
So these are all wonderful things that people can go and check out. And I would say, hopefully, you guys have enjoyed this. But, Gracelyn, let's say that this is a nice way to conclude. At the death of Julius Caesar, he had his apotheosis. He was a man.
Yes, he did.
Oh my God, because we're still talking about him today. So somewhere, maybe he's looking down on us saying, yes, that's right. Thank you. I
I agree 100%. Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. And yes, he conquered. He conquered all of our imaginations because we're still talking about him
That's right.
over 2,000 years later.
Exactly. And, so we can use this, these stories, and remember that you can check out your virtual tours of
Hmm.
the Palatine Hill, of Julius Caesar in the Roman
Yes.
Forum. We even have a virtual tour doing just the forum itself with Caterina. It used to be
Hmm.
designed by Francesca. And then, gosh, we have so many other things to go over with these
Yes.
stories. And if I recall, you also did a TE Walks live that we'll eventually put on YouTube. It's where you were almost trapped on the Palatine Hill during a storm. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I didn't think I was going to get out that night. Every
You're like,
gate I
guys,
went
it's
to was
raining.
closed.
It was like, remember the storm came through and then it was empty,
It was
Um,
empty. There's nobody there. It was just me. I was like, I think I'm going to fall asleep under a monument because I'm never getting out of this place.
yeah, I mean, as I've said before, when I've done that tour inside St. Peter's, that it's completely empty. These are such unique opportunities. So it's
True.
great if we can look at things and say this is a lemonade. We out of these challenging times to be able to go to that place, the Palatine Hill, and have it completely be empty is
No, and taking advantage of it. And the fun part is we take advantage of it. And then when we're filming them, like the live walks, is sharing it. Because when else, like when we were together in St. Peter's, remember, we were the only people in front of Michelangelo's Pietà. How often does that happen?
yeah, it is. And it's just like then you get to the soul of the work. You have this
Mm,
boom focus and this kind of interaction that you have.
right.
It's really exceptional. Well, thank you very much, Gracelyn. I really appreciate
You're
you
welcome.
available. Now, I know that we're going to be out doing some future podcasts to go along with our future
Hmm.
uh, videos on YouTube. So we're going to be seeing you talk about Ostia, and we'll
Ostia
also
Antica, exactly.
yep, on our podcast, we'll also talk to you about Casa Gandolfo and Aricia. Anyway,
Yes.
to everybody else who is listening, thank you for joining our very first episode with TE Talks, so Through Eternity Talks with Guides. And if you've enjoyed it and you're listening on the podcast, please write on our podcast channel, give it a rating. I believe you can go up to 5 stars, and also please write feedback because all of that stuff will help us get more attention and bring us more business, which is such a big help and very important for us. And if you're watching it on YouTube, please remember to subscribe onto YouTube and click the bell and share this stuff with other people because we really want to get the word out. People who have been encountering us, they really enjoyed what we do. So I think others will too. Thank you very much, Grayson.
Great. Thank you.
Baci baci.
Machi.